Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome our speaker for today, Mr. Sandiaga Salahuddin Uno, and Mr. Choi Shing Kwok, Director of ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to today's Indonesia Studies Program seminar on Indonesia's future economy. I now have the pleasure to invite Mr. Choi Shing Kwok, Director of ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute, to introduce our speaker and chair the seminar. Mr. Choi, please.
Our special guest speaker, Mr. Sandiaga Salahuddin Uno, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome all of you to this seminar on Indonesia's future economy, organized by the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Those of you who attended the Indonesian forum that ISEAS organized late last month in this same ballroom will remember that our keynote speaker at that forum was Indonesian Minister for Industry and Chairman of Golkar Party, Mr. Airlangga Hartarto. At that forum, Airlangga shared with us his assessment that the main issue for the coming year's general elections in Indonesia would be on the economy. It is therefore very apt that the topic for today's seminar should be on Indonesia's future economy. As all of you know, Indonesia's economy is facing tremendous pressures recently as a result of the tightening of monetary policy in the US and in other advanced economies. The tightening has triggered capital outflows from emerging markets, including from Indonesia. These developments have further strained Indonesia's current account deficit and also weakened its currency. In addition, the rise in world oil prices and the weakening of the rupiah have also impacted on the economy, putting pressure on the state budget and on domestic consumer prices. The economic outlook has been further clouded by the occurrence of two major disasters that recently occurred in Lombok and in Palu. Besides the disruption to economic activities in these localities, it is also envisaged that quite a significant amount of resources will be needed to rebuild these affected areas and communities. This will spread the country's resources thin and will pose a challenge to current and future governments to manage and to build capacity to revitalize these economies as well as to manage natural disasters going forward. On a broader basis, the Indonesian economy has been doing relatively well compared to other emerging economies, but some analysts do believe that it is not performing to its full potential. The reasons for this are varied. There are areas such as infrastructure bottlenecks, bureaucratic inertia, foreign investment shortfalls, and also some policy coordination issues. On the other hand, there are also many positives: a very young population, a surging middle class, growing domestic consumption, very exciting new entrepreneurial activities that are going on, as well as sound fiscal and monetary policy. Against this backdrop, we are very privileged to have Mr. Sandiaga Uno back in ISEAS. He has been in ISEAS to speak before, and he will share with us his insights on how Indonesia will manage these challenges and harness the opportunities ahead. As co-founder of PT Saratoga Investama Sedaya, the first and biggest publicly listed active investment company in Indonesia, Mr. Sandiaga is eminently qualified to speak to us on Indonesian economic matters. He has served as the President Director of Saratoga from 2004 to 2015. and he led the investment firm to establish a solid track record of profitable investments across many key sectors in the Indonesian economy. Since 2005, he has also contributed to the Indonesian business community by serving as chairman of several well-known national associations and foundations. Besides being a successful entrepreneur, Mr. Sandiaga is also one of Indonesia's most prominent new political figures. He led the development of the Greater Indonesia Movement Party Gerindra Party's economic platform for Indonesia as vice chair of the advisory board from 2015 to 2018. He was elected vice governor of Jakarta in October 2017. And as you all know, he is now running for vice president of the Republic of Indonesia next year, alongside presidential candidate Mr. Prabowo Subianto. Not content even with so much on his plate, but Sandiaga is also a PhD candidate at the University Pelita Harapan in Indonesia, focusing on strategic management. He has also received the title of Distinguished Research Professor in Residence from the George Washington University, from which he holds both master's and bachelor's degrees. Please join me in welcoming Bapak Sandiaga to share with us his vision on Indonesia's future economy.
Thank you, Mr. Choi, for such kind introductions, and you elaborate a lot on Indonesian economy. You took some from my notes already that I was going to speak. Anyway, first of all, thank you very much, ISEAS, for the invitations. And this is always a very prestigious event that I look forward to attend. And I think I came 2015 for the discussions on a panel for investments in Southeast Asia. And today, the invitations to talk about the future of Indonesia's future economy could not be more opportune time for us to discuss. I'd like to thank for the audience who came here despite the rain. We came from Batam today, and it was not raining in Batam. But once you come to Singapore, it rained. We believe in Indonesia that whenever it rains, it brings berkah. It brings fortune. So I hope my visit to Singapore, which is my first overseas visit after the announcement, would be very fortunate for both countries and for everybody's here in the future. Inshallah, that it will be an eventful and full of blessing by God. So I prepared some slides, so I'll go over it very quickly because I think most of you already very familiar with the Indonesian economy. I would like to focus on the questions and answers, and maybe you have some questions that that's not just economy, but other matters like politics or issues, current issues in Indonesia. Feel free. I'd like to keep the presentations very short. In one word, about the Indonesia's future economy is basically looking very optimistically. I am a perennial optimist. I have been an entrepreneur, and when you are an entrepreneur, you always see a glass half full. We have challenges in the Indonesian economy, but I believe that the countries can overcome those challenges, and we will see that Indonesia's rise to be the powerful economic powerhouse in Southeast Asia is going to be realized within the next few years to come. So for those of you who don't know my history, I used to live here from 1992 to 1997, 5 years. And it's always good to be back here in Singapore. It's very nice, and there are memorable times. I used to live along this road. It's called Lucky Plaza Apartment, not too far from here. At that time, it was a place for Indonesian workers to gather, and the Filipino workers to gather during the weekend. But I had a very good time spending the first 2.5 years of my permanent residentship in Singapore, living in Orchard Road. I worked in an investment company here until I lost my job because of the Asian financial crisis. The investment company that I worked for closed shop in 97, leading to 98. I had to pack my bag and go back to Indonesia. And because it was such a bad economic conditions in Jakarta and throughout Asia, that I didn't even want to bother to send an application letter to look for jobs. I was worried that if I sent 10 letter of applications for jobs, I would receive 15 or 20 rejections. It was that bad, the economy. But actually, that was the time that by default, by accident, that I became an entrepreneur. I started a small consulting firm. Basically, a lot of companies needs to restructure their balance sheet. A lot of US dollar debt, US dollar commitment, it needs to be restructured. I went in and because of my knowledge in finance, I was able to land some of the restructuring in the early days. It was hard. It was definitely very hard for a 27, 28-year-old consultant landing jobs within the Indonesian big firms. But thank God I managed to be able to get few good clients, and long story short, the consulting firm become an investment consulting firm, and then we raised some fund to start making investments, and before we realized, we grew from 1 company to 28 companies, and this year, I just got a report that the companies that we started around 20 years ago is now employing around 30,000 workers in Indonesia. So I was very fortunate, and I think being back in Singapore bring me goosebumps, how it all started. I still remember places. I don't remember all the MRT stations anymore, but I still remember the price of chicken rice, which made headlines in Jakarta. So a lot of the hawker stall here should thank me that I promote chicken rice in Indonesia. I miss Singapore. And when I was in business, I at least once a month or once every quarter or twice every quarter come to Singapore to attend board meetings. But since I joined politics, I left all my directorship and focus on economy. I don't want to be in conflict of interest situations, so I left business altogether and joined Pak Prabowo and Gerindra party in 2015. I ran with Pak Anies Baswedan for the Jakarta gubernatorial race in 2017. I had my job only for 10 months before I got the appointment, very last minute, to accompany Pak Prabowo on this ticket. So since 9th of August, I left my job in City Hall and started touring the country from all the way from the east part of Indonesia to the west part of Indonesia. And now this is my first trip to Singapore. So the topic of today is Indonesia's future economy. So I have some notes here. I think Pak Erlangga put it very, very correctly that the focus on the elections will not be on other thing but economy. And specifically, it's about jobs. It's about prices, food prices. The two issues would be jobs and food prices. So in recent times, I think the first slide, if I could switch it. Basically, in recent times, we see that Indonesia is growing with. Is this my presentations? Okay. Doesn't look familiar. Anyway, it's very funky. You guys doing a good job. Indonesia's, if you talk about Indonesian politics, a lot of people wanted to talk about the unity, about religion, about other things than economy. But if you deal directly with the people, when you go down to the grassroots, and I've been within the grassroots communities in the last 2 years, starting from the Jakarta campaign to now, they only talk about the economy. So it is a street talk. A lot of people said jobs and prices would not be street talk, but it is a street talk, and it's top of mind on Indonesia. And I think if we bring some of this insight, a lot of millennials worry about jobs, and a lot of, we call it mak-mak, we call it the power of moms, the power of mothers. The women have been complaining about food prices, and the reasons chicken price was made famous in Jakarta because of my remark that food prices is getting more and more expensive in Indonesia, which is backed by data from the World Bank. So if you look at the GDP growth rate, I don't need to dwell, but there is basically a growth of 3.7% from 2018 to 2020. And Indonesia will be in the fourth spot here, growing at around 3.7% share of the world's economy. We are growing about 5%, and I think a lot of people said that we should be thankful that we are growing 5%. Some people said that it's not, we should be growing at more than 5%, 6 or 7%. Well, depending on how you look at it, we definitely need more growth, more investments to create the jobs that we need, new and good quality jobs for Indonesians. So if you look at the US, it's growing very, very strongly, and a lot of money will go back to the US, just what Mr. Choi just speak. There's external issues that Indonesia's economy will be facing, but that's beyond our control. We should focus on our internal economy. And our internal economy is facing some internal key challenges. We look at issues about the sluggish economic growth. It's actually something that we could fix easily. Some of the reform package that was promised has not been implemented. The tax reform. We had a successful tax amnesty program. Even Gerindra, out of nowhere, supported Ibu Sri Mulyani tax amnesty program, and we're oppositions. I was advising the general. The general said, "Are you crazy? It's going to cause a lot of problems." I said, "This is good, but it has not been followed by reform in the tax. How about reform in labor? We have not done a reform in labor. The economic growth is because basically not only foreign investors, even domestic investors is not investing yet. They're into wait and see. Their excuse is actually, it's a political year. We want to see. But every year in Indonesia is a political year. 2017 is a political year. 2015 was a political year. 2018 was a political year. And 2019, as you know, is the mother of political year. So, but in a way, I used to be a businessman. When we see opportunities, regardless of if it's a political year or not, we invest. We need to make money, and we need to fix. And the investors are looking for, where is the beef? Where is the package that has been promised to us? The reform. Labor, you call it license, permits. We're making progress, yes. We need to appreciate that. We're making good progress on infrastructures. But the infrastructures that has been built is basically dominated by state-owned enterprises. And a lot of investors said that it could have been easily funded by public-private partnership. But rather, it actually piled on debts to the country. And the weakening exchange rate right now is, what, 15,200? It's almost similar to when we hit during the 97, 98. So we're within striking distance. Current account deficits, which is actually caused by the trade deficits. It's something that we need to be really thinking of. And while there are external issues, we need to fix the internal issues, some of our backyard problem. And the key challenges is how we could, with all this unemployment, especially the youth unemployment, how we could create the jobs that would be needed for the country to grow. And how do we, there are four engines of Indonesia's economy. First is definitely domestic consumption, which has been really strong. But we are seeing some weakening of the domestic consumptions. A lot of people says, well, it's a shifting towards online. I'm not seeing that. I just see that all the small, medium enterprises that I meet saying that in the last 4 years, business has been very sluggish. So it's a challenge for us. And we have not really, in a nutshell, we have not really done the needed reform on the economic reform that we would like to. And I think Ibu Sri Mulyani would agree with me. And this is not even politics, and I'm not campaigning here. Nobody here would be qualified to vote on the 17th of April, 2019, right? So, but I guess 2030, Indonesia will have 131 million labor forces, twice than the Philippines, which is second biggest populated country in ASEAN. Challenge lies in the 70% low-skilled worker. How we could get high school graduates, which is now having, especially on the vocational school, having the highest unemployment, how to get good jobs for them. So we haven't really optimized our labor force. There is a silver lining, though. There's always good thing, and if you're Javanese, and because ISEAS studies Indonesians very well, and 60% of Indonesians are Javanese, so we always say untung, and it's always lucky that we have this, and it's always called silver lining or hope. So the silver lining is within, again, our domestic economy. Every musibah, oh, by the way, I need to also ask you to join me in prayers for the Lion Air's JT 610 Jakarta to Pangkal Pinang, which basically now confirmed that it got into a terrible accident, and I think rescue is underway. So if I could take a moment of silence for a few seconds to pray for the victims and the family, and without really, we have no confirmations of what's the situation's like, but we still hope for the best. Thank you. So there's hope. So we need to strengthen our domestic economy. We create jobs, move up the labor productivity. Entrepreneurship is very, very key. Indonesians are very entrepreneurial. So in Jakarta, I started an OKOC program, which is like a movement. One district, one center for entrepreneurship. Within 10 months, we had more than 50,000 applications, and we created close to 20,000 jobs, and we brought down unemployment by 20,000 at the same time. We could do the same nationwide. We should develop resource-based industries to increase economic productivity by putting in more processing industries. This is the same story over and over again, but under, I'm not campaigning, but if we have strong government with firm leadership, I think we could execute some of this source of growth, new source of growth. And then we stimulate economic growth within ASEAN. I was in Batam. Sad in Batam, the growth is actually the bottom of all the 34 provinces, while Singapore and other places is growing. So we need to figure out how to strengthen beneficial relationship for the region, how we map with our ability the non-traditional partner for trade. The domestic economy, we have demographic dividend, and if we have the right policies, this bonus for demography is increasing productivity, and if we execute the right kind of strategy, we will be able to increase the economic growth by 1 or 2% at least. At least we could grow easily 6.5%. That's how I look at it. And on mapping the non-traditional partner for trade, we could see other places. Well, China and US are fighting, but that's not just our two main trading partners. There are other trading partners that we could develop. We need to improve our trade deficits. We need to boost exports. I think we have missed the window, but there is still a chance for us not to lose our sight on the goal. We need to move up our manufacturing capabilities. Our history and the future. Yesterday we celebrated a very historical day, 90 years of Sumpah Pemuda, whereby 17 years before independence, 700 guys and girls, probably the millennials at that times, maybe they're called not millennials, but jokingly some people, Indonesians said they're the colonials, started the Sumpah Pemuda, which basically proclaimed that we're one land, we're one nationalities, even before we have Indonesia, and we have one bahasa, which is the disruptions and the innovations during that time is they pick a language that is not spoken by the majority. The majority spoke Japanese, but they spoke, a very small minority spoke the bahasa Melayu, whereby I was born in Riau, in Sumatra. That's what the language that we speak with Pak Miftah here. But they picked that language to be the national language. And in 1945, 17 years later, then we have Indonesia, and then we adopt the Bahasa Indonesia. So 90 years fast forward, today, we need the same kind of resolutions. How do we create jobs, and how do we stabilize price? That should be, I guess, the goal, because if we grow like this without any focus, our growth will not be with good quality, and then you will have inequalities, and the inequalities will be an embryo for social instability. So we need to also push the industry to compete, I guess, progressively going forward. And we have technology now. We didn't have technology back then, but we have technology. We can create ecosystems. We harness innovations. You've been to Jakarta and other places in Indonesia, they have Gojeks, they have Tokopedia, they have Bukalapak. These are great innovations by Indonesians, great entrepreneurs, young people. And now, within the age of 20, 25, early 30s, they are already making it to the top 150 richest Indonesians. So we need to harness more and more innovations like this, and we need to award people with capabilities, opportunities, and how we improve investment climate. The President and the Cabinet have tried very hard. They made progress. We have to appreciate that. And people said that I'm not your typical politicians because I don't mince my word. When I say good things, I said good things. If it's bad, it's bad. A lot of people criticize me when I took my job and I actually, some of Pak Basuki or Ahok program, I actually continue. Because I said a good program should not be burdened by the political realities. You may be in a different political spectrum, but if it's a program that is benefiting the people, we should continue. And this is the same thing that I told the Indonesians, that we will continue to build infrastructures, but we would do it differently. We would bring in more private sectors. We would bring in more long-term strategic funding to our infrastructure build-up. We do not want to pile the country with more debt. It's going to burden the economy. So I guess that is my last slide. I want to say thank you very much for allowing me to... Oh, I'm running. Where? Well, I used to run here in Singapore a lot. And actually, my first marathon was a stand chart. At that time, it was not called a stand chart, but it was called an army. It was an army marathon or something like that. So I began my career in long distance running, actually here in Singapore. So, and I always dream that Jakarta someday will have running tracks like the one in Singapore. I hope the 2019 elections will be running together with the president to achieve, we and Pak Prabowo committed to have a very clean elections. We don't want to bring any other items than economy. We want to make a race that unite the country. We don't want to talk about anything that would divide the country. We don't want to talk about religion, race. We want to focus on how this democracy could be different than other democracy that would divide the country. We've learned it from 2014. And I think Pak Prabowo is much more relaxed now. Too relaxed. He made me work. I'm doing much of the heavy lifting, but he said that, wow, our numbers is increasing and you are doing the job. Maybe you should do some more. But anyway, that's what I'd like to share with you. I'm open for question and answers, and please feel free. It doesn't have to be on economy. It could be on other things. So once again, thank you, Mr. Choi. Thank you for everybody, and good luck.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think you've heard a very frank talk from the heart, and also I think he has espoused a different ideology, a different political ideology, which is something that you can question him further on. So I don't think you want to hear my voice, you want to hear his replies. So may I invite you all, if you would like to pose a question, make a comment, please lift up your hand wherever you are. Somebody will come to you, or you can go up to the microphone that is there. And please give us your name before you pose your question. So is there, I will take about 2 or 3 questions at one time, and then we will invite Pak Sandi to respond to it. So who will be the first?
There you go.
Yes, please.
Thank you. My name's Eve Warburton. I'm from the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Eve, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to ask you a question about food prices, because it is a very politically sensitive topic. And you know, what economists would say is that the easiest way to bring down food prices would be to buka keran impor.
Yeah.
So open up to more imports,
Imports.
particularly with rice. But politically, it is such a sensitive question, and so the Jokowi government is in a very difficult position. Bring down rice prices, get criticised for importing.
Imports.
So either in your experience as an entrepreneur with your background in finance or as a political candidate, what is the answer?
Okay.
Can we
Is
have,
this 1 or 3? Okay. All right.
can we have other questions before we invite Pak Sandi to respond? Yes. Chen, right? Yeah, please.
Hi. Hello, I'm Chen from the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. But I would like to hear from you. You mentioned that reforms have been slow in coming in Indonesia. If you and Prabowo were elected, what would be some of the reforms that you will focus on in your first year of administration? My second question is with regards to the digital economy. Some say that it has the potential to unlock the growth potential of Indonesia. What are your thoughts on the digital economy, your assessment, and what do you think will be the stumbling blocks? Thank you.
We will take these 3 and then we will come for the rest after this. So just if I may, Pak Sandy, let me just add on to the last question, because recently I mentioned we had an Indonesia forum here in this hotel, and one of the speakers there was from the new industries in Indonesia, and he said he was extremely excited to see 2 unicorns from Indonesia, and he was looking forward to many, many more. And so I think the digital economy is something that seems rather to have a lot of potential. Do you agree? And if so, what are the things that can be done to make this accelerate even further? So 3 questions: food prices, reforms, digital economy. Please.
Oh, thank you, Eve. And I guess it's demand and supply. I learned it in Econ 101. So the problem is supply. And even before we talk about supply, it's actually data. Now the government is fighting openly in public. Kementerian Pertanian is fighting with Kementerian Perdagangan. Trade is fighting with agriculture. Agriculture said we have enough productions. We don't want to import. Trade says, no, you don't. We are in short. And they're openly fighting in public. People are confused. So under Prabowo Sandi, first we want to fix the data. We want to operate. Actually in Jakarta, we continue Pak Ahok's program on Jakarta Smart Cities. We have basically big data approach to everything that Jakarta people would need. Basically from how much rice they consume per day, how much shallots, how much chili. Oh, Indonesia love chili, Pak. When chili price skyrocket, politicians could get really in the hot soup. So we want to fix the data first. And actually, our farmers have been able to, and I had to agree with the agricultural minister, that we have been punching way below our weight in terms of agricultural output. We have not really put the right technology. We have been really marred with problems in relations to fertilizers, and we have not been really employing the organic fertilizers. So I want to fix the outputs from the agricultural sectors. Once we have the data, we already know how much Indonesians consume, and then we know already the trend. How much are we able to produce domestically, and how much do we import? Under Prabowo Sandi, we have to be very open. If we cannot produce, we have to import. So my two, and has nothing to do with our numbers of, well, in Jakarta, it's in Indonesia, there's ticket number 1 and ticket number 2. You guys would not understand this because in the voting ballot, there's a lot of people who say 1 and 2. 1 is the president and 2 is Prabowo and me. So without referring to that number, the two issues that we need to fix is the availability. And secondly, definitely is prices. Once it is available, we need to make sure that we don't import. Because right now the farmers complain their productions have not been absorbed by the state. It's actually all the storage is full. And yet 1 to 2 million tons of imports are coming in. So this is a fiasco that we want to fix. We just have to be very open. We want to focus on the productions of rice and other food staples in Indonesia, and we should be able to be self-sufficient. But if we can't, because of we're not that productive yet, then we need to maintain the price by also allowing imports to come in, but not until we fix the data and not until we make sure that all the productions by our farmers have been absorbed by the markets. I think Cheng Cheng's asked what type of reforms. I mentioned tax. We want to put a gas pedal on tax. We need to widen the tax base. We have not really grown the tax base. After the tax amnesty, the tax base is almost like stagnant. Our tax ratio is less than 11%. Actually now people said it's less than 10%. We should be at 17%. We need to reform on labor. It is almost impossible to hire and fire. There's a law number 13, 2003 that is hate, that is actually rarely a legal product that is hated by both sides of the equations. The labor movement hate it, and the business people also hate it. So why not revise the law and make it more flexible? Let's not make it too rigid. If the labor law is too rigid, people don't want to invest. People invest in Vietnam, and I've seen it. People says, we don't need to invest in your country. If you make it so difficult for us, I understand that it's a huge opportunity. The market is in Indonesia, but you guys need to help us to help you. So the exports industries, a lot of people within the exports industries that we would need complain about the uncertainty of law. The law keep on changing. It's like playing a soccer match, and in the middle of a match, you move the goalpost. It's impossible. If you're in business, you don't want to invest in that situations. And we would change basically our approach to allow, industry to flourish, give incentives for industries that actually employ a lot of people. And if industries bring in good technology, we would not be shy to provide incentives, tax incentives. Why not give tax holidays? People invest in your country, create jobs. We have not really been more active or more aggressive in terms of attracting investors coming into Indonesia. The digital potential, I think I agree, and stumbling block is regulations. Stumbling block is also certainty of laws, and how you unleash it is you create an ecosystem. you let these entrepreneurs play in the sandbox, pretty much like what Nadim is playing now. If you look at Gojek, it's actually against the law, because you cannot have a public transportation on motorcycles. But almost, I don't know, millions of people actually got employed by Gojek. And when we opened the main arteries in Jalan Tamrin for motorcycle just after we got inaugurated, is because 480,000 small enterprises is using motorcycle to deliver food or products within Jakarta traffic. So I guess the government needs to work harder with these young entrepreneurs to ask what do they really need, rather than telling this is what the country is going to. And I think the how the OJK is doing a sandbox approach for fintech is something that Prabowo Sandi would allow more within the creating the ecosystem. We mentioned Bukalapak. That's a company that started by a very young guy by the name of Ahmad Zaki, who attended my mentoring session. Right now, he was able to, he's now able, Bukalapak, to provide access to market for 4 million small, medium entrepreneurs. Small, medium enterprise use their platform, use their marketplace. And then we see that if we could allow more Indonesian products within that marketplace, it actually would be benefiting more into the job creations that we are really looking forward to. To Mr. Choi, yes, unicorn, we have few already, and I'm very proud to mention the few unicorns that we have, but we need more. Indonesia is such a large economy. I think we are capable to produce 30 to 40 unicorns within a few years from now. Each unicorns would be valued between $1 billion to $3 billion in market cap. And we need to allow some of the relaxations on the taxes whereby people invest in new startups. And if those companies lost money, right now the complaints by the startups is actually almost impossible to close that company. And they are going to be after by the tax people because they are now basically the tax people thought that it's some kind of scheme to avoid paying tax. But actually that's people invest in startups and lost money. I mean, in startups, out of 20 opportunities, maybe you make 1 or 2 or maybe 3, but that 3 actually made up to the other 17 that you lose money, or even make it 3 or 4 times more. So those type of ecosystems needs to be introduced. And I think if we want to be competitive within this Industrial Revolutions 4.0, we need to be thinking along that line. And I believe a government that is focused to be pro-business, pro-innovations, pro-entrepreneurial spirits, pro-risk-taking. We need to embrace people to take more risk, to be proactive, and to be innovative. We need to provide incentives for people to take those type of risks.
Okay, yes, so Budi and also at the rear, yeah, the lady at the rear.
Okay, hi, selamat sore Pak. My name is Aninda. Aninda. Okay, my question is regarding the renewable energy in Indonesia. The current government has projected that the mixed renewable energy would be achieving, they would achieve 23% of mixed renewable energy in 2025. However, currently, the government only achieved around 10% of it. So, and then we still have 8 years to go. despite all of the flaws in the regulations, right? What would you think the future of the renewable energy in Indonesia? And as an entrepreneur, how could you attract investment on renewable energy? As we know, Indonesia has a lot of challenge in building those renewable energy projects. And particularly, what do you think about the coal industry when it now seems to take a big role in energy industry in Indonesia? And we know coal is not really clean for environment. So what's your take on it? Thank you.
Yeah, Najib, please.
Thank you. I'm Najib Burhani from ISEAS, and also actually a chair of in a department in Muhammadiyah.
Oh, I'm also in Muhammadiyah.
So I'm
Pak Burhan ya Pak?
Najib.
Najib.
Najib Burhani. I'm not an expert on economy, but I'm curious about economy Sharia economy, demanded by some members of PKS, Partai Keadilan Sejahtera, Welfare and Justice Party, one of your ally, I think, right? And also promoted by Ma'ruf Amin.
Yep.
Are you planning also like implementing this program, economic Sharia, and also certification of halal in Indonesia if you are elected as vice president? And then the second one is about globalization and commodification of religion that is flourishing in some cities in Indonesia. What are you planning with this program, with this commodification of religion? Thank you.
Maybe one more, yes. Pak Leo.
Hello.
Pak Leo.
Yeah, my name is Leo Surendinata. I would like to ask Pak Sandi a question about the investment, and especially about the investment from China. What is the roles of the Chinese investment now in Indonesia? Is there any problem? How significant is the investment? If you are elected as the Vice President of Indonesia, what sort of policy that you would like to introduce toward China's investment? Thank you.
Okay. So 3. I have invested in renewables, and I have to agree with you, it's very, very hard. It took us 20 years to nurture a project on geothermal because we had to deal with hundreds licenses and permits from the local authorities all the way to the central government. Typically, this renewable energy project will take 5 to 7 years. I've invested also in mini hydro. Similar thing. It's very, very cumbersome in terms of the regulations. When I joined the City Hall government, now I'm on the other side. I was on the other side, and I looked from the inside. I also got frustrated with so many, and I cannot blame the government anymore because I was at that time part of the government, part of the local government. And it is deregulations that we would need to attract investments into the sector. Indonesia has 40% of the world's geothermal reserve. Indonesia's waste energy is huge potential. Hydro, huge potential. Solar panel, huge potentials. And I used to joke that there is an Earth Day every end of March. I think it's Saturday night that you are asked to switch off your light from 8:30 to 9:30. And because I have some followers in my social media, A lot of friends ask me, and some from the organizer ask me, please support and tweet or Instagram post the invitations to switch off your light from 8:30 to 9:30, and I would go like, guys, please switch off your light from 9:30 to 8:30 to 9:30 tonight to support Mother Earth, give Mother Earth a break. And then within 3 minutes, people from North Sumatra said, oh, Pak Sandi, we don't have to switch off our lights, it got switched off by itself. And yet, in North Sumatra, there's such a huge geothermal capacity there. And I think on Sarula power plant, we managed to finish the first phase, but it has a capability to be 3 or 5 times more than the size. But it takes years to develop. So we need to deregulate fast. We need to invite private sectors, expertise and governance and capital investments to invest. And this is not going to be popular, but I'm going to say it, but PLN needs to work with private sector. Let private sectors invest and not crowding out. A lot of projects are now, people complain, and this has also been in the news because Kadin also spoke about this, that state-owned enterprises basically hogging all the infrastructure projects. So we would do it differently. We bring in the expertise, best of the best from the industries, and because I come from the private sectors, I know what's would attract them to invest, the IRR that would make sense. But those IRR have to be attractive enough for them because they are going to take some kind of risk of uncertainties of the laws, risk with regards to mini hydro, some changes in the geotechnic, because you know Indonesia is land whereby there are a lot of earthquakes. So that's how I would do it. Deregulate. This is the reform that one of the reforms that I was thinking. How we could bring in more new and renewable energies into the energy mix faster. Right now it's only 10%. We need to be all the way up to 30 to 40%. So I would speed up reform. I would ease all the restrictions. I would get private sectors to invest, and they will invest because it makes sense. It's clean, it's profitable, and it provides jobs. Now, what do I think about coal industry? As you know, I am a big coal investor in my past life. I'm no longer a business person, but coal has been a primary source of fuel for some of the power plant. And we have been getting, I guess, a lot of investments within the coal industries during the commodities boom. But now coal industry is not as attractive as before. The way I look at it, I guess our focus should be more on renewable energies. The coal industry is there, and we need to make sure those who are operating in the coal industries think about the sustainable way to operate their mine and make sure that it's environmentally compliant. I think we need to focus more on what is actually the low-hanging fruits, which is the renewable energies. I think it will be very difficult for coal industries for the next future because I think the environment shifted. People prefer more to invest in the new and renewable energies. Pak Najib, Sharia economy is still very, very at a fraction of its potential in Indonesia. And this is in relations to food, tourism, and many other, banking, obviously, and other sectors. When I was vice governor, we created a a working group to see how the Sharia economy could actually help propel the growth for economy in Jakarta. And in particular, Pak Najib, in relations to jobs that could be created. We see Sharia economy, and I think some friends from the Sharia Economic Council is here with me, is actually one that have huge potential if we are able to tap sectors such as the halal tourism, the halal hotels, that's actually now very much growing. Food is one thing, logistic is another, and many other facets of the Sharia economy. I know Pa Ma'ruf has been very focused on this, and actually I was in his team when he, together with the Sharia Economic Council, announced the push towards Sharia, more Sharia economy within the national economy, and I think it's good. It provides another locomotive to go beyond the 5% that we're actually now experiencing. The certification is quite challenging at the moment because I think we have so much potential, but the market is not absorbing the certification business quickly. In fact, there are more foreign companies coming into Indonesia to basically provide that type of certifications. So pretty much like the productivity certifications, I think if we're not fast enough to tap this opportunity, I think more and more company would come in and look at how they could be closing in and move faster to provide the certification. But I think it's positive for our economy and it provides jobs. On religion, actually, yeah, it's happening now. We need to look at it in a holistic manner. I am quite optimistic. I've gone through the 2017 Jakarta gubernatorial elections, whereby I see it real with hard data, with our big data numbers, that the numbers of people who are basically using religions and I guess moving into echo chambering on each spectrum is actually very small in numbers but loud in social media. And this is jobs, this is our task as leaders to ensure that the Islam is rahmatan lil alamin, Islam that is a religion of peace, that actually provide I guess benefits to the surroundings that we would be promoting in Indonesia. And I think a firm government with I guess commitment to Undang-Undang Dasar Negara Republik Indonesia tahun 1945 and Pancasila is going to be I guess the strict foundations for this. And that's why when Prabowo announced that he select me as a running mate, he understands that some of these issues is actually propelled by economic injustice, and we want to make sure that our economy is growing so that we could provide opportunities for the medium to lower income brackets, so that they would have I guess a much more wealth going forward, and some of this I guess issues that we are seeing that is propelled by some of the economic injustice could be easily mapped and hopefully solved. Pak Leo, investment in China, we need investments. So I was speaking on Pak Dino Patijalal's conference last week. What is my opinion on investment from China or from the US? I said we need to attract both from China and the US. All the investment. We need all the investments that we need to create jobs, because Prabowo Sandi are looking for job creations. And it's not the government that create jobs. It's the private sectors. It's the business. And if we want to attract investments, we need to create a conducive investment climate. And in particular, China, I think they're good at certain things. I have been partners with Chinese companies. Some of them are working very efficiently, sometimes too efficient. And I had to face the consequence now. I built a power plant in North Sulawesi with a Chinese partner. Right now, the plant is operating less than 60%. Because some of the repair that needs to be taken place cannot be done by Indonesian workers, because all the manuals are in Chinese. So it's a fact of life, but I think we need to do it better next time. And I made a mistake also as an investor to look for the lowest price possible. But there are some Chinese companies that provide world-class infrastructures, and we need to have world-class infrastructures in Indonesia. So we're very open to investment in China. However, we need to work harder to make sure that those opportunities would create jobs for Indonesians first, and some of the jobs that cannot be filled by Indonesians, the Chinese workers can, within 4 to 5 years, train the Indonesian workers to be able to take that type of jobs. So I think it's going to be significant, the roles for Chinese companies to invest, and our policies will be very conducive for investments, not only from China, but from other part of the world, Europe, US, and other Middle East, and even Southeast Asia countries.
Just to give everybody kind of notice that we are coming to close to the end of our time. So if you want to ask a question, you should be fast and jump in right now. Oh, okay, there are people queuing up, so I shall hand it over to them, please.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Selamat sore, Pak. My name is Ingmar. I'm an Indonesian national. I'm currently here for, I'm a PR here. So my question is about your comment earlier. Earlier you mentioned that we are within striking distance of the USD Indonesian rupiah exchange rate. However, the thing is that the context now, as opposed to 20 years ago, after the Asian financial crisis, is very different. Do you think that Indonesia's economy really is on the brink of a repeat of the Asian financial crisis then, because the context, the fundamentals are already so different nowadays as opposed to 20 years back? Thank you.
Yeah, please keep your questions short also, so that there's enough time.
I will answer that very short. No. We're not the same as 97, 98, but we are also not in good shape.
So, thank you, Chairman. Since the answer is short, I hope you will give me a bit more time. I have one, in the spirit of the coming election, I have 1 or 2 issues. Pak Uno.
Hi, Pak. Good to see you again.
Good to see you back. So, Chairman, I would like to say it's nice to see you back in Singapore. I'm happy to hear that you say you miss Singapore. So all the more you must come back more often. I met Pak Uno first maybe 10 years ago. And even then, people were already talking that he's a potential presidential candidate. And
Thank you.
He's a lot more matured now, better looking, and better,
older.
and ready for higher calling. The question I'd like to ask, actually, 1 or 2 issues. You mentioned, Pak Uno, that, but coincidentally, Your name Uno means number one, right?
Number one. Unfortunately, we're number two.
But you are number two.
So we're duo.
There may be some blessings that you cover all grounds. You mentioned just now about economy basically is the issue for the next election. Some may question that, whether it's too simplistic an issue, whether you're talking above the heads of the average Indonesians. Yes, you talk about cost of living, which is very important, but is your approach too macro, too, maybe too Singapore actually? Sounds like PAP at elections. So my question is actually, what about the non-economic issues? Religion for one, political for the other. What about the politics of the Songko and the Sarong, as against the politics of the millennial, which I think you are closer to, all the women folks and their votes? So I'd like your answer on that score. And the second question is, looking forward to Indonesia-Singapore relations, we have the traditional areas of cooperation, but looking forward, last week I was at a conference, Singapore Economic Society, where the former EDB, I think Economic Society, the former EDB chair or CEO telling me that he has a contract or a deal, AI, artificial intelligence, with guess who? The Minister for Religious Affairs. Now that says a lot about the kind of new relationships, new opportunities, and new bonding between Singapore and Indonesia for the future. I'd like your comment on how do you see Singapore-Indonesia relations in the economic sphere? Thank you.
Take the last few
Yeah,
questions. Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay. Selamat sore Pak Sandi. I'm Farah Wardani. I work at the National Gallery Singapore. So I work in arts, so my question is relating to that. So as we reckon that the current government set up the Creative Economic Council, like the BECRAF.
BECRAF.
Yeah. I just want to see how you see creative economy factors in your future in the Indonesia economic vision, because I also see that you put so much emphasis on digital economy and startups, so I wonder how you see creative economy that.
Okay.
The last.
Hi, Mr. Sandi.
Hi.
I'm a NUS, a PhD student here. I actually also just came from Batam. I was doing my field work there, working mostly on the digital economy and mostly on Indonesia and Singapore. And actually, thanks so much for uplifting, I would say, a talk, because not only we talked about economical problems and all that, but I'm quite jealous. I'm coming from Turkey, to see such leaders and a line of leaders in Indonesia who are very excited to sort of ease means of doing business and all that. So sort of in that line, both in your capacity as a politician and both as a successful businessman, what is the Indonesian model? So when someone asks me back home, we see how China developed, we see how the West developed. How do you think Indonesia will make it? How do you think, this could be true for any other country as well, but I think Indonesia could have it in a very unique, in a way that maybe we don't even expect right now. What is in your mind that will sort of make Indonesia, bring it to another level in terms of economics and doing business? Thank you.
Okay, and I think that was the last question, and you have
Okay.
just 5 minutes.
Okay, Ingmar, very quickly, no. To be honest, we are completely different in terms of our fundamentals, different. But yeah, it's close to 17,000, whereby we hit in 1997. And we cannot be complacent about this. We need to, because things could go bad really, really fast. As you know, 97, 98, everybody says, oh, things are going to be all right, And then suddenly one bank collapsed, followed by another banks. We're not in that situation, but it could be easily like that if we're complacent. So I think the team right now would agree with me that we need the structural reform that have been promised, but politics got in the way, and we have not been getting. Even with the strength of dollars, our tourism business should flourish. We haven't seen it that way. Our export business should actually benefit. We have not seen that. So fundamentals is different, but if we're in an excellent shape, that's a wrong way to look at it. If we blame it all to external, that's also external factors. That's a wrong way to look at it. Also, there's internal issues that we haven't really fixed. The trade deficits we haven't fixed, current account deficits, the deindustrializations that is below now 20%. Pemborosan, Ingmar. What is pemborosan in bahasa Singapore? Too much spending lah. Government too much spending on things that could be spent by private sectors. Why government spend it? I think everybody would agree with me, and we lack of fiscal discipline. Ibu Sri Mulyani would agree with me, although not openly. Second, I guess on the economy, I'm actually looking at micro, Pak. I'm not looking at macro at all. If you look at macro, Indonesia seems to be all right, and we would not have a competitive election. So, by the way, survey said that it's going to be a lopsided. I think it's going to be, not because I'm in the race, but it is going to be competitive because of a micro issues. The micro is how people felt on their pocket, stuff that they see on an everyday average people of Indonesia facing their daily life, their daily necessities. I'm not simplifying things, but there's a beauty in being simple. Politics is about sentiment and momentum. The sentiment of the people is basically, at least half now, felt that they are not in a better positions than 4 years ago. 65%, based on our internal number, is actually complain about the rising prices. 54% said it's very hard to get jobs. Now, those are at the core of the issues. Now, we could be talking about non-economic issues. Yes, there are plenty, but I don't want to be engaging in discussions that is not going to actually benefit the country. The politics of Songkok, we did not use it. Pak Prabowo focused on economy and how he want to groom next future leaders. And he said to me exactly like this: oh, I want to groom the next future of leaders, but it may not be you. Don't get comfortable. He said, if Allah give the mandate to us and the people of Indonesia vote for us, he said, there are other young leaders. So I want to make the place for the young leaders to show up and start being tested. So that's the reasons why I was chosen as the running mate. We want to move away from those politic of Songkok. Politic of millennials, we are having issues because our number says that 50% of millennials don't even want to vote. They don't like politics. Politics is too, what do you call that? Too dirty for them sometimes, too boring. And these people want something, these millennials want something authentic, relevant, and talkable. They like something viral. And politics is nowhere near viral in Indonesia, only in very small. So I need to bring in content that could attract millennials to the voting booth, let alone vote for us, but just to get them interested to vote. Because in Indonesia, as in many other places, voting is not mandatory. Politics of women now. For the first time, we brought in the issue of women. I said in my opening speech at the Elections Commission's office that there are a lot of political parties here, but there's one party that is missing, which is the party of Ma, the power of women. and it's just caught like a bushfire. It spreads all over the country. Today in Batam, there are hundreds, thousands of women show up in our rallies. You know, they feel energized. They feel the vibes. They feel the elections. And for the first time, they are making these elections very excited for women, because some of the issues that have not been talked about is now bring to the center of the discussions, which is the kitchen, food prices, how they provide educations for their kids, how they ensure good jobs for the young graduates, and so on and so forth. Lastly, I agree. The Singapore and Indonesian relationship is basically coming into the next level. I was here for the World Cities Summit, I think a couple of months ago. Yeah, June. Not knowing that I would be in this place now. I was happily trying to forge a relationship between the city of Jakarta with HDB, and how we can provide affordable housings to Jakartans, and many, many more. So I see that the Singapore-Indonesia relationship is actually flourishing. I think the new leaders are now getting to know each other more. I met some of the new breeds of politicians in Singapore. They're also looking forward to a much closer relationship. And thank you for the compliments. 10 years ago, I was much younger. I ran faster. I have more hair. But at least now, 10 years after, I was a PR here also before. But I lost my PR because in 2000, Mr. Choi, because I still keep the letter. The Singapore immigration sent a letter, said that since you are no longer gainfully employed, we regret to inform you that your PR is no longer valid. So, but for some reasons, I still remember my IC number, S6976364B. It's amazing when Ingmar talk about PR, suddenly that number pops up, and I still remember it. And it's more than 20 years ago. Anyway, Backcraft. I see creative economy is basically the next pillar. I like what Pak Triawan Munaf is doing. I think he needs more attentions. I think he needs more platform. He needs more money there. We'll allocate more money. Right now, 9 to 10% of the Indonesian's economy is actually contributed by the creative economy. I think we want to target 15 to 20%. This is how we create new jobs. This is how entrepreneurs could be competitive, is within the creative economy. There's a culinaries, big segment on culinaries. I think big segments on fashions, also on tourisms that relates to creative economy is also booming. So yeah, I see a great future. And if we are getting the mandate from the people, I think we want to actually enlarge the Backcraft and the creative economy contributions to how we could create jobs. Last questions. I think Indonesia will be great. Simple. I'm very optimistic. And regardless what the result of the campaign and the election, I'm very optimistic of how Indonesia will be not only 5 years from now, but 15, 20 years from now. I think we will realize some of the potentials. There's a great economist, I would not mention names, but there's a great economist who said 20 years ago that Indonesia, a country with sub $1,000 GDP and toying with full-fledged democracy, would not be able to make it. Indonesia will disintegrate because the population is too poor, the country is too big, it's too fragmented, it's too many islands. I'm glad that 20 years later, Indonesia is where we are now. 16th largest economy of the world, going to be 7th largest in 2030. Big demographic dividend, bonus of demography. It's growing. The politics is stabilizing, except for some people. But we're maturing democracy. I think we're hitting the right targets. And I think Indonesia, I am very optimistic. Economy-wise will be great. Will be number 5 or number 7, depending on how you select the next leaders in 2019. It could be number 5 if you choose number 2. And I stop at that because I may violate the election law. But yeah, I'm optimistic, and I hope we could, as what the founding fathers want, we could really be participating even more active in the international scene. Indonesia's rise up to the occasions, be, I guess, country with the largest Muslim populations will show to the world that Islam is a religion of peace, and the country is showing that how democracy, Islam, progress, modernity can take place at the same time.
Thank you very much, Pak Sandi. I'd just like to make 2 very short points. Number 1, I think that audience has been very easy on you. There were many other questions and issues which I believe perhaps they would like to ask, and I think that that actually is good because it means that you must come back for another such event in the future so that those other issues can be addressed. And the second point is just to say that thank you for telling us the story about the immigration letter. I think indeed Singapore's loss is Indonesia's gain, and I think that you have shown us today that there's great optimism ahead for Indonesia, whatever the result of the election next year, and also there's great future for you, Pak Sandi, whatever the result of the election next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandiaga and Mr. Choi. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's event. Thank you very much for joining us here today and for contributing to the discussions. We wish you a pleasant evening ahead.